The Apfo requires to have a joint meeting between the County Council and the Board of Education to discuss the individual schools and the Board of Education's plan on addressing those capacity issues. The legislation doesn't technically say in what timeline that has to take place, but as the school capacity chart does come out each year, it would be understandable that it would be sometime within that year, and the next school capacity chart is scheduled to come out in May.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure there was not something additional that I was missing. So I also see Mr. Bronow is here with us. Mr. Bronow, have you, earlier in the year, we've talked about the approach that Montgomery County had taken during their general planning process to really ascertain and understand where their students are coming from, the unit types their students are coming from, so that they can understand how to balance workforce housing, as well as ensuring that our schools are not overcrowded. Would you be able to touch on your efforts here in Howard County? And then after you speak to that, I think it'd be really great if we touched on a conversation that we sort of last left off last summer, which was about the timing of the numbers. And if the numbers that are code required are the best numbers that we should be looking at, or if we should be looking at the enrollment data that comes through in September. So Mr. Bronow, if you could start off with what you're doing to really research and get the data so we can make the best decisions possible. And then I think it'd be great to touch on when we're sourcing those numbers and how we can be most effective and most accurate.
Sure, certainly. Good morning, everyone. So we're making good progress on your question regarding trying to analyze, similar to what Montgomery County did, regarding where students come from and the history and sort of the life cycle of homes by home type. So we have secured an agreement with the Howard County Public School System to receive data from the school system. So we have that data, and our goal this year is to look at that data to come up with some statistics or assessment of sort of the life cycle of homes and students in these new homes over time. So we don't have that yet, but our goal is to work on that this year. The intention of that really is to provide data to show these trends in Howard County, really as a lead up to once we have the Apfo committee in place. Because after the general plan is adopted, then we're going to need, we have up to a year to have the Apfo committee to relook at Apfo and to relook at all of the way things Apfo is working. As you know, Hoco by design, it's really a sort of a paradigm shift. We're moving into redevelopment. So the question is, how can we change Apfo within that redevelopment, situation? And so part of that will be to look at the data. How many children are coming from apartment units, for example? Most of the future development in Howard County is going to be higher density mixed use development, such as projects like downtown Columbia and the Activity Center. We know we're not getting very many students right now in downtown Columbia. I think something of 2,000 units that have been built in downtown Columbia is part of the downtown plan. I think this current, if you look at the September 30th, 2022 enrollment data, there's like 41 children coming out of that. So the types of apartments that we're building in the future is going to be different than the types of apartments we built in the past. But we're going to try to look at that in more detail over the next year coming up.
Thank you. Mr. Bronow, do you think that would be completed prior to this summer?
That's a good question.
It would probably,
so.
Let me rephrase. It would probably be helpful to have that completed by this summer. So that way it could be part of our discussions when it comes to the managing growth and supporting infrastructure chapters, as well as the allied agency chapter that covers HCPSS.
That's good. We can certainly work on providing it by this summer, certainly, yes.
Great, thank you. And then Mr. Lubley and Mr. Rogers, if you wanted to touch, this is just sort of a follow-up to our discussion last July, August, but really sort of going to, is what's in the code really giving us the best resources, to the best information to work off of?
So I'll let Mr. Rogers address that. I do want to let Ms. Watts know, because I don't think that she can see the dais. Councilmember Young has raised her hand, so I just want to make you aware of that. But Mr. Rogers? Sure. Tim Rogers, Manager of School Planning. Good morning, everyone. The timing of the data that's used in the school capacity chart, that's, as Ms. Rigby mentioned, that's something we've been discussing for a couple of years now. It's our position that the data that's provided is the most reliable and accurate reflection of the annual planning cycle that the school system undergoes, which begins with an enrollment projection presented in the feasibility study, and then informing a capital planning process that culminates with the adoption of a capital budget, usually in late May. And so other timing would result in data from other points in that annual planning process. Ms. Rigby, you specifically mentioned using September enrollment data. I think that could be challenging because we don't generate a new projection immediately following September 30th. We enter into that process and gathering data over the next several months to generate a new projection to inform staffing discussions and those internally, and then presented in the feasibility study the following spring. So we can, if the county council would like to receive a school capacity chart based on a newer projection or a different point in the capital planning process for capacity utilization calculation, that's something we can discuss. It's the county council, essentially it's the county council's law, so we'll provide the data that the county needs to implement their law.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear about what I'm hearing. You're saying that for HCPSS purposes of capital planning and staffing, that using that number in the code is really what's needed for that purpose. If we're looking at a different capacity process, more of a updated snapshot versus a long-term, capital project program, then we might have different purposes for the numbers. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think what's required in the code is that the capacity chart be adopted concurrently with the housing allocation chart. So adoption is what's codified. The data, the specific points in the capital planning process from which the data is derived are not necessarily codified. That's my understanding. But it's our position that the current process aligns the enrollment projection and capital planning process in the most effective way, so that the numbers you're getting represent an entire year of capital planning.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Lubley. Councilmember Young.
It's hard when we're both here and we have these Germanic names. So I have a number of questions. Some are for the two of you. One is for Mr. Brown and one's for the school board. I think I'm going to start with the school board question first. Did the school board, if you can refresh my recollection, didn't the school board vote that elementary schools should be at 100% capacity? As opposed to 105, which is APFO.
If I remember correctly from our policy, it is 100 from 90. I think it's 100% instead of 110 was our
105, yeah, it was, elementary
much.
was 105. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Yes, Mr. Lubley.
If I may.
I'm calling on you, Mr. Lubley.
Absolutely, thank you. If I may clarify on that, so the policy that Chair Watts is referring to is policy 6010. So there are several different numbers that are out there. The board in the last review of policy 6010 did identify that the goal and purpose of the policy is to try and have all of these schools at 100%. The policy still reflects, though, the triggers of the policy with regards to that 110 number. So the 110 number in there, which triggers into potentially redistrict or the consideration for redistricting, is still there. But yes, the board did make it very clear that the goal is to have the schools at 100%.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you to this next question, which is the following the adoption of the general plan, an APFO committee is formed. And I don't know, were either one of you here during, neither one of you were here. Okay, so I don't know if you know the answer to this question. Maybe Mr. Bronow does. I'm wondering what the school district's role is on the APFO. You know, Mr. Lubley. Okay, you can respond. Great. What the school district's role will be on that upcoming APFO committee.
So in general, the school district's role would be to obviously advocate for the school system. I do know that the committee is made up of multiple members, which does include a representative from the Board of Education, as well as a representative from the school system.
I assume that the school system would not be advocating for more overcapacity numbers in your schools. I don't know, but I wouldn't think that you would be doing that. Okay, and Mr. Lubley is nodding yes, he would not be doing that. Okay, so I have one more question for Mr. Bronow. You mentioned that the downtown apartments, the Howard Hughes built 2,000 luxury apartments, that I think that's exactly what you're referring to, that they don't have a lot of students coming from them. But then there's a whole grouping of apartments on Route 1, which apparently are not luxury apartments and contributed mightily to the overcrowding of Thomas Viaduct when it opened, and the elementary school over there as well. So it really does matter, I guess, regarding the type of apartments. And I guess going back to Ms. Rigby's characterization of apartments as workforce housing, that the apartments that were built on Route 1 would probably be more likely to be workforce housing versus the luxury apartments in downtown Columbia, which I just learned actually are being rented for, at the Juniper, $4,500 a month. So I don't think that would generally qualify as workforce housing. So what are you, when you are asked to create these projections, are you going to look at the difference between apartments and luxury apartments? Because that's a really critical point at which there's a lot of kids and not a lot of kids.
Yes, I mean, that's 100% correct. So every apartment unit generates different types of yields, for sure. And when I was referring to downtown Columbia, that's correct. They're luxury apartments. They're a lot of studio and one bedrooms. So you're not going to have as many school children in those apartments. Along Route 1, there might be some more apartments with 2 or 3 bedroom units. And the way that projections work, so our role, DPZ's role in the projections, we provide the school system each September the projected units by unit type, whether it's apartments, townhomes, or single-family detached, and the location. And so part of the projection analyses is the school system takes that data, and they have very detailed yield estimates by school district. So they're down to the school district level. So there's 40 elementary schools. And so if you have historical trends in a certain elementary school and a certain type of apartment units in a certain area, for example, in the Elkridge area along Route 1, then those yields would be reflected in the projections based on historical trends, based on the average yields from new units built over the last 5 years, for example. So those higher yields for those apartments along the Route 1 corridor that you referred to would be reflected in the projection methodology. And the lower yields in downtown Columbia also would be reflected. So those come out in the future for countywide projections at the school district level. So there is a pretty detailed methodology in play when trying to determine these nuances between apartment unit types. My main point when I was speaking before regarding the sort of the paradigm shift with future development is that apartments in general, there's going to be more apartments built relative to single family detached over the next 10, 15, 20 years, compared to the last 10, 15, 20 years. And the yields in apartment units are less than single-family detached and townhomes. So I'm only saying that because part of the study that we're going to do that Ms. Rigby mentioned is going to try to look in more detail of these types of unit types moving forward and the life cycle of these unit types. And if we can, we're going to try to get into the details of the different types of apartments as you bring up, because the more light we could shed on this, obviously the better, because that will help inform a better APFO moving forward, given the changing land use projections moving forward in the county.
Mr. Rogers, I think, wants to add something. Did you want to, you looked like you wanted to add something, and since I'm looking at Mr. Rogers' face, sorry about that,
Mr. Bronow did an excellent job of summarizing and explaining our projection methodology with regard to new construction and yield rates, and our projection methodology with regard to estimating students from different types of housing. So that was what I was going to explain, but he hit the nail on the head with that.
okay.
Ms. McCoy?
I was thinking of Thomas Viaduct as an example. The level of condensed housing in that area is outrageous. It seems to me that this new move to have these, boxes of people put together in apartments is creating the issues that we as a school system have to deal with, because you all permit all these condensed housing that's going to be all over the county, except in the West, of course. What consideration is being given to the amount of concentrated housing? When I looked at the Thomas Viaduct area, there isn't even a green area in the spaces near Thomas Viaduct. It's just condensed, really packed in housing. Is that what the future of Howard County is going to be? And if that's the case, then where is the fidelity of keeping with the APFO policy of allowing builders to just opt out of providing enough diversity in the housing so that we don't have the concentration of populations like we do now in Elk Ridge? I look at Wild Lake as a perfect example of the balance of different kinds of housing, and we've moved so far away from that. It's a crime.
Yes, I mean, those are all really good questions. And I would say that there are different areas of the county that are planned for different types of growth. And, Route 1 has had a history of, since the 2000 general plan, really, and the comprehensive rezoning following the 2000 general plan, of having redevelopment areas for purposes of providing more housing, because there's a very big housing demand in Howard County. So that area of the county was really targeted for mixed use redevelopment to make nice communities where people can live. APFO, the intention of APFO is to address crowding that might result in some areas. And so there have been a lot of projects, as you say, in that area. APFO has actually held up many of those projects for many, many years, and they are coming forth and will continue to hold up projects that come forward in there. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But the intent of APFO and the goal of the APFO committee is to try to make a better APFO moving forward. Regarding the future types of housing, Hoco by Design, which is the next general plan, the general plans are updated every 10 years. We've been working on that for about 2 years with hundreds of public meetings and hundreds of input from the public all over the county. And that plan is now online, and a lot of, I think, the explanations or the land use policies in various parts of the county are in that plan. So I think everybody interested in this should look at that plan because there's a lot of great information in there about that. I don't know if that helps, but that's a general answer.
Well, thank you, everyone. That's all the hands I see.
Ms. Watts?
I'm like squinting at the screen to see if Councilmember Walsh is raising her hand, but go
Yes,
ahead.
she does.
Oh, look at me. Okay. Go ahead, Councilmember Walsh.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to make sure this discussion that we're having now, this is the one that we're having pursuant to Section 16.1103 of our county code, the one that's required to have the 3 weeks notice, and we have this discussion.
Correct.
Okay. The part I'm confused about is that what we're supposed to be discussing today is, I would have expected some identification of where these schools or school regions are, where we exceeded this 95% capacity and projected to exceed 110. But also, we're supposed to be discussing the Board of Education's proposed solution. And I haven't heard a discussion about that. We're also supposed to include the county executive, the person who decides how we spend our money. And I don't see a representative from the county executive, at least here in this room with us. Maybe that person is on virtually, but I'm sorry to say, this is not the conversation that is required by our code. You know, whether we had it timely or not, I'm not hearing any of the elements being discussed. Hopefully we can do that in the next 10 minutes, but this is not that discussion, unless the board's proposed solution is to do nothing, which I earnestly hope is not.
So Councilmember Walsh, we are prepared to at least talk about some of those items to at least facilitate the discussion between the county council and the board members. So, Mr. Rogers?
Yes, the listing that was required by code was provided with the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance school capacity chart back in the summer of '22. I have the board memo, so I'm not sure. It might be a different page in the documentation that was provided to the county, but it shows in the board memo on page 9, titled 95% or greater capacity utilization in 2021 and projected to be 110% capacity utilization by 2027. That chart that's shown on this page lists several elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools that are projected in the information used to generate the Adequate Public Facilities School Capacity Chart to exceed 110% utilization by 2027 and are already over 95% utilization as of school year 2021-22. I'll mention that many of the high schools, actually all of the high schools, were brought within target utilization or within this range identified for the chart following or are expected to be within this target range following the redistricting that came with High School 13, Guilford Park High School, as well as the capacity added by that school and the addition at Hammond High School. So I anticipate if we were to redo this chart at this moment, the high school list would be 0 schools. And then the elementary school and middle schools, I would like to mention that many of them utilizing the more recent projection from the 22 feasibility study would be less likely to show up on this chart due to lower projections following decreased enrollment as a result of the impacts of the pandemic. So, and then the solutions that are identified, as you can see, many of these schools already have relocatable classrooms. We do analyze and take action on relocatable classrooms on an annual basis. This year, for example, this summer, we anticipate relocating several portable classrooms that are at high schools that will be relieved by the redistricting following high school. I'm going to keep calling it High School 13 because the name just occurred, Guilford Park High School. And so we're looking into ways to reassign those portable classrooms to provide relief to some of these schools that may be on this list, and as well as the additions at the middle school level that are identified here at Patapsco, Dunlogan, and Oakland Mills. And then the additional high school or elementary schools identified as elementary number 43 and 44. All of these projects will likely have boundary review associated with them, enabling us to provide relief to the crowded schools shown on this chart. So that's kind of a summary of what's shown on the chart, and at this point, we'll be happy to try to answer any questions in the limited amount of time that we have. Any additional discussion, we'll be happy to meet with board members or county council members offline to further provide any detail that can't be provided in the next several minutes.
So I'll follow up. Are these solutions on page 9 of that memo then the board's proposed solutions? I mean, we have this conversation every year. What are we doing differently? I understand that Guilford Park has solved the high school problem. But you have, 10 elementary schools and 6 middle schools on that list. And I know, from I have 4 or 5 of those 10 elementary schools just in my District 1. You can't redistrict out of District 1 any more than you already have. And I'm, not happy to, but at least it's not exclusively District 1 anymore. You extended the problem into more of the county than just my Elk Ridge Route 1 and my northeast corner of the county. And we have these conversations later than we probably should have, but we don't change anything year after year. I mean, next year, I'll just remember what I said this time and say the same thing again. And I probably, without having done that exercise this time, probably said the same thing last year.
There's nothing that money can't change, right, gentlemen? I mean, you look at the list and you see what the proposed solutions are. Presumably, you went over this with the school board. And at least 3, maybe 4 of them are additions, which, as we know, are very expensive. And you guys need the money. And then the other solution, which always makes me sad, is the addition of more trailers. And I see that there were 9 this year that you were recommending. And to me, when you're getting to the point of addition of more trailers, you're looking at the need for additions or a new elementary school, particularly in the area that Councilmember Walsh is talking about. And do we have the money for that new elementary school? And why would we keep developing or allowing new developments if we don't? And that's us.
Well, and that's one solution that I would bring to this conversation, and especially as part of this general plan, is the school system, whether through the board or the administration, needs to really be out in the forefront and seeing where that plan development is and making sure there is reservation of space for what we think it takes to build the new school capacity. I mean, whether as a policy change, we're going to start just building much bigger schools or adding on to what's there, or if we know that there's going to be a need, that we actually set aside the land and have the money to do that before it's gone, which is what's happened in so many of my neighborhoods. That's the only solution I see is you have your projections, you know where the general plan is putting this stuff. Is there an allocation of space available for us to school our children in the way that we would hope to be able to do, consistent with, this legacy of excellence or whatever, but not always compromising with our kids?
Let me add one piece to this. When Councilmember Young talks about money, I need to bring that to the table in a different way for the council and the board. There has been some movement of front at the state level from the governor to add more dollars to the capital budget, to the overall state budget. And we've had the beginning of the preliminary discussions with our board about what that's going to look like through the process of the CIP as we move forward with the approval of that. We've also have the Build to Learn Act that has additional dollars associated with it. And then this past year, there were pass-through dollars with specific designations that Howard County received amount for as well. My challenge with that, and I advocated for this again on Friday with the new executive director of the IAC, who has been present with us, is that we have plans to address this in terms of the funding necessary for the building of schools, et cetera. But until the adjustment of the county match is relieved or there's an increase of the county match, we end up possibly leaving dollars on the table. And I'm just talking in the bigger context of this. There's a lot of granularity to it. And so my concern is that I would hope that there could be some discussion about, one, allocating additional percentages for the match to occur so that we can advance the projects. That's one. Or as collective, the body politic of both of these bodies, advocating to the state level for the release of those dollars without those matching conditions. And every time I advocate for this at the state level, I hit a brick wall. So those same rules are in place. It's wonderful to know that there's a possibility of us receiving $14 to $15 million more for capital projects based upon what's contained within the governor's budget. But there's still that same issue of funding that at the local match. And I really want to lift that up in the presence of both bodies today, because that's a real challenge for us. And we have had a very thoughtful discussion about the long-term CIP. You all know that. We have a 1-year, we have a 10-year. We put those in. It creates consternation and frustration within community when we push it out, but there's only so many dollars available to move these forward. So our solutions are very clear. Obviously, we're very thankful and excited about Guilford Park High School. All three projects that we've advanced, Talbot Springs, Hammond High School, Guilford Park High School, have all added capacity. But yet it's moving so rapidly that we have the long-term CIP contains those elementary school and other projects of which we need. I've given clear direction to staff as we advance this to the board that all of our additions, all of our projects and renovations and new projects always have to add capacity, you know, at the level of which as we attack this. So relocatables or learning cottages that I like to refer them to, which is referred to as trailers. I like to talk to them about learning cottages. Mm-hmm. But learning cottages, the issue in terms of additional building, and managing through redistricting are the three tools of which we have to us as a school system. And then the other conversations have to occur with the collaboration of all our other bodies to help us address these concerns. So in essence, thank you for allowing me to speak about that first topic that is real and germane to the conversation as well. Mr. Washington.
We are at 11:30.
Well, thank you.
So I do want to kind of wrap us up. I know that as always, when we have these discussions, they can continue well beyond our scheduled time. School staff as well as board members are always available to have discussions with county council members just about any of these topics and all of these topics. And I really want to take the opportunity to thank CA and Rec and Parks and County Council school staff, everyone for being here and really kind of committing to this discussion to really work on the education and well-being of the whole child in our school system. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
This meeting is adjourned.
Have a good day.